the Electile Dysfunction Podcast with Ashton Cohen.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Electile Dysfunction Podcast with Ashton Cohen. I'm Ashton Cohen. I'm joined today by Scott Newent. Scott is a transgender man and founder of TReVoices, a group of trans educators who oppose radical gender activism and seek to educate politicians and families about the reality of gender dysphoria and fighting to stop the medical transitioning of children worldwide. So we're going to discuss the issue of transgenderism today from someone who has a substantial knowledge about all issues concerning that subject, and from someone whose perspective is different than the myopic viewpoint that is broadcast and propagated by the legacy media and culture. So I've been wanting to talk to Scott for quite some time. It's a pleasure to have him on. Scott, thanks so much for being with me.
Thanks, Ashton. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it as well, man. So if you will, please give us, like, people unfamiliar with you, tell us a little bit of your background, how you got involved in this activism now, and what your experience has been like.
Well, at about the age of 42, 43, I started to medically transition. And during that process, I went through significant health issues, 7 surgeries, a pulmonary embolism, a stress-induced heart attack, a 16-month infection that no doctors could help me with. No doctors understood what was wrong with me because, trans health is experimental, and it almost killed me. And so I spent 17 months studying trans health to try to save my own life. And in that process, I realized that trans health is absolutely experimental. It's detrimental to health. We're not talking about that. Not to everybody, but most people have medical complications that come away from it. Nobody's telling people that. And so after 17 months, I figured out what was wrong with me, and I kind of saved my own life from that perspective. But there was a time when I knew I was going to die. And I had no doubt. And it was late at night one night, and I had been having pain, and I passed out from pain, and I woke up in my own urine and blood from the infection. And I remember just breaking down and just, saying, God, the universe, or whatever, if you allow me to be here for my 3 kids, I'll make sure that I let people know about. And I thought it was just the surgery, right? I would let people know about the surgery. And then the further I went into this, I kind of, with having retrospective doing it and being a little bit older, sitting back and going, what in the fuck are we doing to children? And so from there, I've grabbed onto activism, which is basically, I'm going to do this until medical transition is stopped, full stop, worldwide for children. It's not for kids. And so I stay in that lane, and that's why I'm here.
So we'll get to the children aspect as well, but let's just talk a little bit of a brief overview, because people aren't familiar with all the, as you've alluded to, the variables associated with some of these tests, these surgeries. So you say it's experimental. So, like, what kinds of doctors are doing these? Is this the cream of the crop here? We don't have a lot of long-term studies on this, because this is something that we've only been experimenting with for a few years. So what are the complications that have been most prominent?
First of all, Ashton, you have to understand from a fiscal, perception, right? And from a fiscal perception, puberty blockers, which is what they're giving children, they're 8 times more expensive when they are prescribed to children. So if they're prescribed to an adult for 1 year, it's about $15,000 worth of, gross monies. When they write that prescription for children, it goes to between $40,000 and $55,000 a year. The company that invented puberty blockers, Lupron, was sued in 2003 and deemed a criminal enterprise by the U.S. government for false advertising and bribing people. This is a company that's saying, hey, you know what? Puberty blockers are safe. They're not FDA approved to use on gender confused children. We have in Europe that, I was working over there for years. They finally have realized that, hey, you know what? We're waving away these unicorn farts and glitter bombs, and we're realizing that this is experimental stuff. We're realizing that we have 22-year-olds with early onset osteoporosis. We have trans men at 24 having heart attacks. We have 19 and 20-year-olds who have the size hearts and lungs of 12-year-olds because they jumped over puberty. But what's happening in society, and that same thing, Biden's a perfect example of this. Total idiot. I mean, it scares me to death that we have a president that says things like it's trans kids' rights to medically transition, and has no idea that every single procedure that is done on children is experimental. The only process that is not experimental is top surgery. Other than that, we're rolling the dice. And then on top of that, every study that was done saying that, hey, it helps kids, it helps their mental health. They're suicidal. Okay, well, medically transition. Let's give them 3 times the dose of regular puberty hormones. They're suicidal and they're going to do great. And then we find out that these studies, these mental health studies that come out that say, hey, you know what, this is a cure-all, parents. If you don't do this, they're going to kill themselves. And nobody looks any deeper and realizes that these studies have all been retracted with, oops, we're fucking wrong. It doesn't help anything. But the media is not doing anything. The media is not saying anything about it. So we have presidents like, Biden, who's about the stupidest president or leader in the entire world ever on planet Earth, is standing up there like a total idiot going, these trans kids, we need to accept trans kids. And I'm all for it. Yeah. I'm all for dudes, do whatever you want. Girls, do whatever you want. But this is an experimental procedure that doesn't help many people. It doesn't help mental health. In fact, it increases psychosis in these kids by 12%. There's so many things that people don't realize. And so for me, being at 42, sitting back and going, hey, you know what? Maybe I was born in the wrong body. Maybe this is why I've been awkward my whole life. Not that, I was an alpha woman who has never learned grace or anything. I mean, I was in business sales. Some dude tried to, compete with me. I wiped the floor with, I made him look like an idiot. I mean, that was my total goal in life. I mean, I didn't fit. And so for me at 42 to fall for these unicorn farts and then realize at the end of it that, hey, this is totally experimental and that we're doing this to children and we're doing it to children like me. People say, why are you so passionate? Here's why. Because 67% of these girls that are medically transitioning would grow up to be, lesbian women, happy, healthy lesbian women. So conversion therapy, let's talk about that. It would be 43% of these boys would grow up to be, gay. So why isn't that okay? That's not okay. And then the comorbidities there's always something. There's either autism or gifted mentally or gifted artistically or homosexual or abused. So we're taking all the children in society that we're supposed to wrap around, right? All the people that if you've ever loved somebody that really didn't fit as a child, I mean, you're really protective of that child, right? Because they're awesome. The world hasn't caught up with how awesome they are yet. And so we're telling those children that, hey, there's something wrong with you. There's a fix for this. And they're feeding this, and the media is not coming back and saying anything. I mean, it took me 2.5 years, thousands of emails, hundreds of phone calls to get an article in Newsweek. One article. And in the last year after that article, man, the unicorn farts are starting to wave away. But then we have, Biden sitting up there going, we need to do this, trans kids. I mean, it's ridiculous. But you don't have people like me that are stepping up because I'm sitting in front of the camera going, yeah, I was a total idiot. I fell for it. I know it's wonderful, isn't it? Yeah, I'm an idiot. So being transgender is a decision. You're born one sex. If you want to be the other sex, that's pretty embarrassing, right? Right? So if we tell people that, hey, you were born in the wrong body, what happens at that point? Then, doctors get to write you a prescription and you get to tell the world, I was born in the wrong body. Now I'm going to get fixed. I'm going to get fixed. And then we have insurance companies that have to pay for it. Then we have society sitting back thinking that it has something to do with human rights. It's not. You create transgender. And when you create transgender and convince children that they are trans, what you're doing is you are promising pharmaceutical $1.3 million worth of lifetime. And we're just talking about cross-sex hormones. We're not talking about surgery. We're not talking about puberty blockers, just hormones.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's unusual for a pharmaceutical company to be engaged in deception, right?
That never happens. Oxycontin is not addictive. Do you know that Oxycontin was sued? Do you know that Lupron was sued for more money than Oxycontin was in 2003, deemed a criminal enterprise by the U.S. government? And then we have a dumb motherfucking president up there saying, it's safe. It's safe. It really is. It's safe. And the problem is that we have politicians, we have liberal politicians that can't step outside of the agenda and look at things from a perspective of being neutral. When you look at things from a neutral perspective with medical transition, there is no one that walks away going, yep. I mean, I'm in a documentary where they did coming out in a couple of weeks, and they were talking about medically transitioning children. At the end of that, I had everybody in the studio crying. You know, they had just interviewed all the people that did the unicorn farts, and I could tell that they were kind of, grabbed by that, like, oh God, I don't want the kids to commit suicide. Maybe this is a good idea. By the end of it, there was nobody in that studio that thought, yeah, it's a good idea. In fact, the two people that did the glitter bombs, they're surgeons. They actually came out going, oh shit, we can't go against Scott. So this is a PR nightmare. So we're going to say that, yeah, I don't think medically transitioning kids is a good idea. Well, it wasn't a fucking good idea 10 years ago. So why are you saying it now? So we have the lead surgeon at WPATH coming out saying it's not a good idea to medically transitioning kids. We have the mental health expert that's also a trans woman saying it's not, now we're seeing hundreds. And it's an article, read it. We're seeing hundreds of kids, that are not doing well. And so the integrity of these people that we're listening to are people that when you push them in the corner, they can't go anywhere. You cannot go anywhere when you talk to me. You cannot go anywhere and come out thinking, it's a good idea. I still think it's a good idea to trans kids.
Talk about, you mentioned quite a few interesting facts surrounding this issue. So you mentioned some facts and figures regarding some of these children. So 67 lesbian, and you said 40-something% would be gay men. These are studies conducted by who?
Well, of course, Europe is pulling back on all this kind of stuff. So these are studies that came out of gender clinics in Europe. Okay. Basically, and what they found was the comorbidities, there's not just one. The odds are there's two. There's either autistic, homosexual. I mean, there's something that's coming out of this. And these are the kids, right? I mean, everybody in puberty kind of goes through. It doesn't matter if you are, G.I. Joe, a football quarterback dude, or your Barbie princess. Nobody feels like they belong, right? But these kids, the kids that, are attracted to the opposite sex, the kids that are autistic, odd fitting, these are the kids that are the most susceptible. And these are the kids that we're transitioning.
So, and so there's also a substantial portion of them, as you said, who have mental health issues as well.
Absolutely. Gender dysphoria is a mental illness. And I'm sorry if that hurts anybody's feelings. We've gotten to a point where it is unkind to look at a 6'2" dude with 6-inch beard and red lipstick and, say, sir.
Yeah.
It's ma'am.
Yeah, right.
I mean, we don't want to hurt their feelings, but they go into the, bathroom with my 6-year-old daughter and I'm supposed to go, oh God, you were born in the wrong, you're a girl. Bullshit. I mean, and that's what's happening with our society. And it needs to stop. It needs to absolutely stop. And we have each different sections of our society trying to take this on. Feminists are trying to, win the trans and kids thing. We have the conservatives are trying to win the trans and kid things. We've got the conservatives. We got the liberals that have their heads so far up their ass they can't see anything. And so we have all these people. And the truth is that what we're doing to children is by far the biggest medical scandal in modern history, hands down. This is going to be 50 years from now. People are going to be drinking wine going,
how'd they do that?
How did that happen?
Right.
How did they do? Just like we do with Germany, like, how did everybody think that would never happen in this society? I used to think about that all the time. Now, I understand we had a president that just stood up and said that, a procedure that benefits nothing mentally, it hurts substantially, takes 10 to 15 years off of people's lives, induces psychosis. And here's another thing, that these kids they're medically transitioning that are suicidal, there's only one long-term study that has ever come out on medical transitioned adults. It was done from 1973 to 2003. Do you know what they found? They followed 324 medically transitioned adults. Do you know what they found? They found that the highest point of suicide ideation is 7 to 10 years after they start medical transition. So we're taking suicidal kids, we're medically transitioning them, we're throwing them into something that's going to ruin their health. They're not going to be able to have kids. In fact, the surgeon, Dr. Bowers just came out and said, she's done bottom surgeries on a whole bunch of trans women. Not one of them can have orgasms. So they're doing all this stuff, And then at the end of it, they're going to be the most suicidal 7 to 10 years after medical transition. And these are the kids that we told, hey, you're odd, but listen, there's a cure, so we're going to fix it. And kids listen. And, oh, they're going to fix it. They're going to fix it. And so when the highest point of suicidal ideation, 7 to 10 years after, which we call it the 7 to 10 year suicide itch as a trans community, we're starting to hit that. I mean, I've dealt with 9 suicides this year of kids that were medically transitioned when they were younger, but it's nowhere. It's nowhere. And so people are saying, oh, a better and alive daughter than a dead son. That's bullshit. And the only people that can say it's bullshit is me, because I'm transgender.
One of the interesting aspects of this, one of the interesting angles is, so going back to the gay and lesbian thing, is so this is you're undermining the gay and lesbian communities, right, by telling children who would otherwise just be homosexual that, oh no, you're actually trans, it's almost like like launching an attack against those communities. And then obviously there's the feminist angle as well, where as we see with the whole Leah Thomas thing and men coming into traditional female spaces and dominating those female spaces, not only in sports, but there are plenty of female clubs that don't even involve athletic activity that will be required to have men come in. And it changes the nature of those clubs as well. So it's like the very people who have been waxing incessantly about gay rights and lesbian rights and feminism and stuff are basically doing the most to destroy those communities and the organizations set up around those communities and the culture around those communities, which is just, it's unbelievable, right? It's not, it's like they were against the right-wing evangelical Christian Republican stuff, and they're the ones who are now destroying some of these communities that they apparently supported. Well, they did support for sure all this time, but that they still claim to represent is the point.
Think about it this way: the first time in history, evangelical Christians are siding with gay and lesbian youth. You know who's protecting gay and lesbian youth right now? Evangelicals. They're the only ones that have the balls to say, hey, no to medically transitioning kids. And who are they saying no to? They're protecting those kids that are going to grow up to be homosexual. I don't know if they know that or not, but that's what they're doing. And here's the problem. I'm 49. When I was in junior high, that was when gay rights was doing their stuff, right? That was when we were reading all those stories about coming out and the conversion, all that stuff. And we've realized that conversion therapy doesn't work. You don't go through that and then come out and go, no, I'm not attracted to the, to the same sex anymore. Now you can choose not to live that life. That is a choice. That's but the core of who you are does not change, right? And so we all sat around with our friends going, I would never, ever, ever do that to my kid. If my kid was gay, I would embrace them. And then society doesn't realize that the LGBTQ is the same place where the evangelicals were 30 or 40 years ago. 30 or 40 years ago, the evangelicals had too much power. They had too much power. And the shit floated to the top, right? Cotton, motels, sleeping with dudes, all that kind of, they were like, and over here, the LGBTQ is going, yeah, look at them, they're assholes. But now, the LGBT, all the shit is sifting to the top, right? You have people in the LGBTQ. Go to a meeting. Where are they going to sit around? What are we going to come up with another fetish flag? We don't have enough. All right. So some people like to have sex in their bed with French fries. Let's create that flag.
Yeah, right.
And nobody's standing up saying, hey, listen, I don't give a shit about what you do in your bedroom. Go for it. You like potato chips, fries, and sex? Right. Go for it. But don't talk to my kids about it. Don't get infiltrated into school. 30 years ago, we promised, the LGBTQ promised, we were not after kids. Right. We wanted same rights. We wanted to sit with our partners who were, dying from cancer and not having to deal with, your families that wouldn't let us in there. We wanted the same tax rights. We wanted this. We wanted that. Think however you want about homosexuality. That's fine. But we wanted those rights.
Yep.
And so it took us 50 years to say we're not after kids. And then 50 years later, what the hell are we doing? We're allowing the medical industry to pull our lesbians and gay, children out.
Yep.
We're doing exactly what we said we're going to. There are packets in England all over the place, and people don't realize this. They are giving packets to like kindergartners saying, if you like blue, and I know I'm exaggerating a little bit,
Right,
but
right.
if you like blue and you're a girl, you're
Mhm.
probably a boy. If
Right,
you
right, right.
ever feel uncomfortable, you might be transgender.
Yeah.
And you have to say to yourself, who benefits from that?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Well, it's so interesting too because like I'm old enough to remember. I'm 30 years old, but I grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, etc. And the whole narrative was against gender stereotypes, right? Girls can like
Mhm.
trucks, but now it's like they're using the most vapid gender stereotypes to affirm that you're of another gender, right? So it's like if I used to when I was like 5 years old, I used to wear my mom's high heels. I thought they're kind of funny and cool, right? Because they're different than what
That's
right.
normal.
And it's normal. You
Yeah,
fuck around, right?
normal.
And today they'd be like, oh no, actually, maybe Ashton really wants to be a woman, right? That would be the message. So let's talk a little bit about because you have a lot of experience with this. In what ways in schools have you seen through your research or maybe through speaking with people about this issue? In what ways have schools, for example, and other institutions geared at young people led people towards believing that they're trans? Are there any concrete examples you can think of?
Well, Florida, there's a case in Florida where these parents had no idea that their child that thought that they were transgender. And the school kind of took a hold of them and said, hey, you know what? We don't have to talk to your parents. We'll do it.
Mm,
And then that child tried to commit suicide. And the parents are like, what the fuck?
right.
I didn't even know nothing.
Mm,
I mean, in Australia, there's a court case that I'm working with the Supreme Court over in Australia where they did the same thing. A mom and a dad, knock, knock, knock.
yep.
We're going to take Sarah. Took her to Perth and medically transitioned her and took the kid away. I mean, these are nice people going, what the fuck just happened?
Hmm.
We have schools. I mean, I just got an email this morning about a school that she got a letter in the mail that had a boy's name and her last name. And she's like, hey, honey, who's this? We have another kid. And the school had changed the name on these kids. And what we're finding is this, and this is what people don't understand, is that conversion therapy for homosexuals does not work. It does not work. It doesn't mean that there shouldn't be therapists, Christian therapists that people go to if they don't want to live that life, if they don't want to do that, go, you can go here and get support. That's fine. But now we have the narrative that basically conversion therapy for homosexuals doesn't work, which it doesn't. It doesn't. I mean, I think the two guys that started conversion therapy, didn't they end up together or something? I don't know. But anyways,
Probably.
it doesn't
Yeah.
work. And so, but we're taking that narrative.
Yeah.
We're taking the work that the gays and lesbians did for 50 years, and we're taking that narrative. And we have stupid motherfuckers like Biden who don't know what's going on. Nobody wants to stand up to the queue. Nobody wants to say anything because you're instantly get fired. We have way too much power.
Hmm.
We are where the evangelicals were 50 years ago. And here's the truth, that children that speak to therapists in a loving way, what makes you think that you were born in the wrong body? 82% of them come away from gender dysphoria. And here's another thing that men don't seem to understand. You guys are still in power when it comes to, being in those positions. And what you guys don't know is that being a girl still fucking sucks, no matter what somebody says. And so the majority of females on the earth have had some kind of gender dysphoria, has had some kind of, God, it would be easier if I was a boy.
Hmm.
It would be easier because you guys don't get it because you're living that life. You don't get it, and that's fine. But it's true.
Hmm.
And so we're taking those kids at that time. Every girl in the whole universe
Yeah.
goes through gender dysphoria. We're telling them, yep, you're right.
Hmm.
I mean, take a look at Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie's daughter, which I think they were wonderful with her. Wear whatever you want, do whatever you want. She's, and she's, coming out of it. But she would have been a perfect one that they would start puberty blockers on her. I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's so. I mean, I could just say, the vast majority of women who I've dated have been very feminine, very attractive. They pretty much have all told me when they were kids they were like tomboys, right? And it's
Oh yeah, absolutely.
yeah. They hung out with boys, they played boy sports and stuff like that. It's very normal. And then they grow out there and
It's
they become
very,
super
very
feminine
normal.
women, who are proud to be women. So this idea that you can know for certainty at the age of 7 or 8, you don't know anything at 7 to 8, let alone making life changing
You
decisions,
don't know
or
anything at 10,
15 or
12,
16
14. Yeah.
either, right? I mean, let alone making these life changing decisions. How easy is it for children? Because I know that some of these liberal states have passed legislation to this effect and have promoted this through various institutions. How easy is it for children to, without parental consent, get a note from like the school nurse or whatever, and then start undergoing puberty treatments and stuff like that, and parents being left out into
It's
the
all
content?
affirmative. In fact, in Canada, if a mental health therapist says, what makes you feel like you're transgender, they could get, they could get their license taken away.
Hmm.
Here in the
Just
United
for
States,
questioning.
we don't know that that's happening. That's passing underneath the radar. I have a cousin that is a superintendent over a lot of schools, and you can't say anything. You can't. I mean, you have to affirm,
Yep.
affirm, affirm, affirm. And we know if you affirm, 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 the percentage of these kids growing up and taking puberty blockers is pretty high. I mean, it's pretty high.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
we're pushing this for children. And instead of, and I think this is great, I actually do role plays with senators and stuff, trying to teach them how to come over these word tracks. And basically, it
Hmm.
hit me one day. They said, how do we come back from a better alive daughter than a dead son? They just walk one after another, in this bill, one
Right.
after another, after another, after.
All
What are
parts
you
of
supposed to
the
say?
Uh-huh.
And this is what you say. This is what you say. And I'm having some Christians do this now, and it stops people in their tracks. This is what you say. You get down on your knees and you go, Sarah, just because you're attracted to girls doesn't mean you're a boy.
Hmm.
Bob, just because you're attracted to Jack doesn't mean that you're a girl. It doesn't.
Hmm. Right.
Let them work that out at the end of it. And so, like I said, for the first time in history, whether evangelicals know it or not, they're fighting for gay youth. You!
Right, 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 right. So that's an amazing thing. Yeah, and by the way, there've been plenty of documented circumstances. I was just reading one about in Palm Springs, California, a few other cities in California as well, in particular, I think Riverside as well, where these children were incentivized by their teachers to be told, "Oh, okay, maybe you are trans," and then the entire school board, the entire school administration, all the children were calling the kid by a different gender and a different name, and keeping that from the parents. The parents were completely left in the dark on this, and this is happening all over the country,
It is.
and it's truly unbelievable.
And we have studies like the I think it was the Wall Street Post or whatever came out with children who medically transition or whatever come out and they're happy, or it helps mental health or something like that. And nobody's taking a deep dive into this. Nobody's taking a deep dive with the fact that all these studies that we're talking about, they're all 3 to 5 years. And what did the only long-term study tell us? 7 to 10 years is when it all goes to shit, right? I read a suicide letter from a 19-year-old trans woman before she shot. There was blood on the fucking paper. Said, Mom, Dad, why did you guys let me do this? I was just a gay boy. Now I can't have children. Now the dating pool's been slashed. Why did you let me do this?
Right,
You know,
right.
I mean, it's nuts. It's
It's
nuts what we're
insane.
doing.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, infertility is considered one of the most unfortunate things that can happen to somebody, especially if when they want to have kids, and we're doing this to children at a young age, destroying their hopes and dreams, destroying their potential to ever reverse from this in a lot of ways. So, what kind of legislation do you think? First of all, you discussed some of the cultural responses that we need to have to it. What kind of legislation do you think would need to be passed to prevent some of these horrible outcomes that we're
Well,
seeing now?
here's the first thing, and this is just a slight deep dive that people have to take. You asked about who's getting into medical transitioning of children.
Right.
I had a surgeon, Dr. Crane, in Austin, Texas, who was in San Francisco, had 9 medical malpractice cases against him, was banned from conducting surgery in San Francisco, has 4 or 5 different medical licenses all over the state. I was the first patient that he did in Texas. I had 6 inches of hair on the inside of my urethra. I went to 8 different attorneys, and they were all excited, to talk to me about it. It was a slam dunk medical malpractice case. And after 2 or 3 weeks, they all came back and said, sorry, we can't take you. Finally, the last one, I had an absolute nervous breakdown. I was throwing shit in my apartment. Well, somebody tell me why nobody's taking this, because I feel like I'm crazy. And she said to me,
Hmm.
she said that trans health is experimental. For me to take your case, I have to create a baseline for care for the surgery that you got. To create a
Hmm.
baseline for care is going to take $5-10 million. Your case is worth a couple million. Texas is a tort reform state, which means that medical malpractice cases on experimental procedures are kind of slim to none.
Right.
As soon as you go up,
Right. Right.
before they accept the case, the judge is going to go, okay, where's the baseline for care? Oh, there is none? Okay,
Hmm.
we'll get that first. So nobody's taking that. We're having doctors, like, in my opinion, that are like the fucking scum of the earth, are all going to tort reform states. Texas is the hub for transgender kids worldwide.
Really?
Worldwide.
Wow.
But
Okay.
last
That's unexpected.
year, Governor Abbott took $2.4 million fucking dollars from gender clinics in Texas. Last year. And this year he says, medically transitioning kids is child abuse. Well, it was fucking child abuse last year too. So why'd you take the money? And he says something like that's supposed to fix something. Well, guess what? They're still medically transitioning kids in Texas. So we have politicians like that. We have dumbasses in the White House that doesn't deep dive. We have children that are cutting their lifespan by 10 or 15%, early onset osteoporosis, having heart attacks at 25, killing themselves, inducing psychosis, not able to have orgasms, all the kids that we're supposed to surround and protect.
These are the people whose lives we're allowing to be destroyed. So essentially going back to the bit about legislation, so it would be basically not having any of these surgeries up until 18, and then maybe even after 18, engaging some counseling before you can go and start removing your body parts, because you can do it without a therapist note as it currently stands.
I got kicked off of Twitter for talking about they're called queer surgery centers. You know what queer surgery centers are?
I'm not familiar with that, no.
I'm non-binary. I have a penis. Cut it off. Oh yeah, you're mentally healthy. I don't know any healthy, mentally, stable dude that's going to say, yeah, cut my penis off.
Right.
Here's the legislation that needs to happen. We need to tell people the truth. We need to tell people the truth. Being transgender is a choice. It's no different than plastic surgery. It's no different than getting a boob job. And believe me, I'm a fan. I love them. I'm a fan of boob jobs. Love them. They're not life-saving.
I am too, for the record.
Yeah, they're not life-saving. They're not. They're wonderful to look at, and I don't know to offend people, I'm sorry, but they're awesome. They're not life-saving. But wouldn't that be great if we forced insurance companies to pay for boob jobs? Listen, I was born with an A cup, but I know I'm supposed to be D. These are supposed to be Ds. This is not who I am. I am a D.
Right.
That's what's happening. But transgender is basically, you can create an illusion of the opposite sex. And for some people, that creates comfort. Not very many. And that's another thing. We don't follow trans people. I've talked to 100. I run an organization. There are some that are, happy with their transition. Unfortunately, there's not a lot. Go to my site and see it. You'll see it all over the place. Transgender adults all over the world are going, don't do this to kids. Don't do this to kids. Don't do this to kids. So we need to tell the truth. It's no different than deciding to get a boob job. If you want to medically transition, go for it. It needs to be safe. You need to have rights. People can't discriminate against you. But by all means, it's not some victim thing that you were born in the wrong body. You were born a gender that you don't like presenting as. So you can create a hybrid version of the opposite and go for it. It's not life-saving. It comes with medical complications. Here are the studies. We know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen. Here, does anybody follow transgender women after 30 years on hormone? Does anybody know what happens to those?
Right.
No, they have osteoporosis. Their bones. How many of those are in wheelchairs? How many of them are alive? How many 30 to 40 years after medical transition? How many of those motherfuckers are alive? Do you see them?
You mentioned the boob job example, and it's way more pernicious than that, because a boob job is much more of a straightforward surgery. It's not experimental. People have been doing like millions of them, and it's changeable, and it doesn't involve taking off sexual organs that can never be replaced. So if somebody walked in and said, hey doctor, cut off my arm, I feel like I'm a one-armed man, no doctor in the world will ever do that. No sane one, at least, other than maybe Mengele. Right.
As silly as that sounds, that's what we're doing.
Right.
We're not holding people accountable for the truth. And basically, the hard truth is, it is embarrassing if you want to be the opposite sex. It is embarrassing. If you think it's easy sitting here saying this, you're wrong. I fell for it. I did. And I have no community. Gay people, that are on this, that are fighting against trans, they hate me because I'm I basically went against the grain. Transgender people, they're out in public, hate me. Evangelicals think that I'm a sinner. Liberals, who the fuck cares, because they're dumb. And then you have conservatives that are, making fun of me at dinner parties. I have nobody. I get attacked from every single angle. If you think this is fun to do this, you're wrong. The reason why I do it is because I made a promise. I knew I was dying, and as soon as I made that promise, my health started to come back. And me giving up on this is giving up on my kids, and I will not until children are safe worldwide. So laugh at me if you want, I don't care. For me, I think of those kids that were medically transitioning, that are odd, that are different, that would grow up and at 22, 23, realize that, you know what, I might be a little bit different. I might, like the opposite sex. I might, be gifted mentally. I might be, mentally ill, but wow, I'm a creative writer. I mean, there's all kinds of good things that come from being odd, right? And you get about 22, 23, you get your groove on you. I'm different, but that's okay. That's good because Sally, Barbie doll, and they're fat and have 7 kids, so I'm going to try to do something with my life. We steal that from these kids. We steal that time that they needed to create that thick skin. We tell them something's wrong with them. And then at 20 years old, when they realize that medically transitioning comes with a lot of damage, and it doesn't fix anything, because at the end of it, you go, wow, I'm not the opposite sex, but I'm not the other sex either. I mean, so people want me to detransition. What am I going to do? Go to the grocery store for the rest of my life going, it's ma'am. I mean, at some point you have to go, okay, I did it, and kind of move on. I mean, there's nothing good that comes out of this. There's no glory. Everybody laughs at me. There's videos of people making fun of me all over the place, but I'm doing it because I made a promise. And I'm doing it because those kids that are 22, 23 years old, that we stole that time that they needed to get that thick skin, they are not going to be okay. They're not okay. They're not. Because everybody lied to them. Society lied to them. The medical industry lied to them. Their parents weren't strong enough to fight things. So they basically are sitting there going, I'm odd. Nobody gives a shit about me. Now my life sucks. My health sucks. And finally, this with this documentary coming out, basically now people that are in power, the trans women that are in power, are kind of going, yeah, maybe medical transition is not really for kids. It wasn't for kids 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. We have the horrid dregs of society, and we're listening to them. We have media that is not talking about this because nobody wants to fight the unicorn farts and the glitter bombs.
No one wants to go against the narrative, and I'll take issue with what you said about you being alone. I think a lot of people, I'm here in LA. I'm in the belly of the beast in a lot of ways. I know a lot of people who are liberal. I know people who are center left, center right. I think a lot of people are reasonable, and I think that your message comes across pretty clear. And when you're the first or among the first people to take a stand, it seems like a lonely place. But this is how tides turn. This is how opinions turn. This is how the Overton window shifts, and we can start talking about these issues, is by people like you who have the credibility, who have been through these things, explaining what they went through, explaining what they've seen, and spouting off the facts to support it. So it's a real pleasure to speak to you. I'm glad we got to do it, and I think a lot of people learned a lot from this, and let's make this conversation continue, because it needs to continue, because what's happening to a lot of these children is just, it's disgusting, it's despicable, and it's like something that shouldn't be happening in today's day and age in a first world society, and we're destroying lives.
Kids deserve us to adult better. Mm-hmm. They deserve that. They deserve us to actually parent. It's a verb. To acquiesce to everything that your child wants is not parenting. You're not adulting well if you do that.
Right. Absolutely. Scott, where can people learn more about you, find more of your work? You mentioned the documentary a couple times. Follow your advocacy and your projects.
Well, my website, it's TReVoices.org.
Scott, it's a real pleasure. Thanks for being with me. If you enjoyed our show, please click subscribe to stay up to date with our YouTube channel and podcast, and give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts so that we can keep delivering guys some great content. Thanks for listening, and we will be back next week. We're going to talk about the issues that really matter. Our country, our economy, the Fed, QE, GDP, BTC, NFTs, AOC, the CCP, Cardi B, Yeezy, Yellow Socks, Iran, Joe Biden's dementia, come on, man, and probably sex robots. We stand for a free and open debate and exchange of ideas. And if you disagree with anything we talk about, you are a racist and no better than Hitler. What? Let's get started.